Welcome back to Spitballin Cards. In today's episode, the Spitballin team is going to be discussing what was good and what was bad for themselves in 2023. In today's episode, my name is Scott. We have Phil, Jeff, and Chris. No Ty this week. Ty, hope you're doing well. And we're going to just jump right into it. So obviously, baseball cards are important. It's always fun at the end of the year to reflect and look back and what was good, what was bad. What do you want to try to do different in the future? That's always the time of year that we're in. And so I want to go over that for each of us individually. So Phil, I want you to start. What was your good? We'll do goods first, and then we'll talk about the bads. We want to make sure you all know we are not as smart as we always seem to be or claim to be. So Phil, what did you do well this year?
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed was the National. I've been to 4 consecutive Nationals now, I think. 19, there was one in 2020, so 21, 22, and 23. And it was really great to see all of the folks that I connect with, on all the various social media platforms. So that was great. I got to meet Scotty B there, actually. Maybe I'll be able to meet the rest of the crew at some point. Teapot was there, of course. One of the things that I did well this year was actually probably not spending at the National. That's 2 consecutive Nationals where I did not use money to buy a card. Given some of my targets, if I had made that action and bought those cards, they would have fallen in value. Yeah, so I might not be as much of a pure collector as a couple of the guys here, especially the bottom of the screen. But sorry, Scott, not trying to throw shade at you, but I like to hold cards 6 to 18 months, probably on average, and that has been a losing strategy for a couple of years now, unless you pick the right player. Of course, there are always going to be exceptions. So certain players that I was going after this past year, it was Patrick Mahomes. I still think the thesis was solid. Now, hindsight's 2020. He's not looking too great. His team's not looking too great, and maybe he'll continue to kind of fall. But not being able to pull the trigger on a Patrick Mahomes card at the National ended up being a good move, I would say. This year for me, I've been a lot more diligent with budgeting. So knowing that, okay, if there's going to be like this unexpected large like wax purchase opportunity, I need to make sure I have capital for that. Knowing that Black Friday and the November time period tends to be a really strong month for being able to pick up stuff for maybe under market value. Prices slip, people move to other sports. That's also a great time to buy wax. We talked about Black Friday a little bit. I've done that a little bit on my channel too. So having more budget for those times, and hopefully I can continue to get better at that. So those were some of the good moments from 2023 for me.
And one of my best moves too was a few cards I actually ended up not buying because they felt good in the moment, but it's amazing how things drop now compared to where they were the last 3 years. So Chris, what about you? What has been your peak moments in 2023?
All right. Well, to start, Jeff and I went to the Burbank show in February, and we had one goal for this show, and that was to buy a Shohei Ohtani rookie auto. He was like a guy we were high on going into the season. And looking back, there were a lot of stuff that now, and more so in August, like the prices seemed fantastic. But we found one card there that we could afford, and it was a Topps Chrome blue auto and an SGC, I think a 9.5. And we ended up getting it for $3,600, which was right around what we had to spend at the show. And we were really pumped. And then obviously we were even happier like 3 or 4 months later. So that worked out. That worked out well. And one of my personal highlights for the whole year was later in the summer, I spent 11 hours in the car by myself, which is an odd setup for a year highlight. It probably says a lot about me and the people around me, but I drove all the way to San Jose from Los Angeles and back in a day to buy another Shohei Ohtani card that Jeff and I had made a deal for online. It was the Topps Black, the number 700 in a PSA 10, which thankfully Jeff has on him right there.
Yes.
So anytime you meet a complete stranger that you've only met like on Facebook and they don't try to kill you and you don't try to kill them, like that's a win. That's a great moment. I enjoyed that. It's a good hobby, but that's a card that Jeff and I love. And kind of conversely to Phil's strategy of 6 to 18 months, that's a card that we are planning on holding, until our friendship dissolves. So hopefully that'll be longer than 6 to 18 months.
Yeah, it could be 6 to 18 months. Hopefully it's a little bit longer than that. that was a great one of our great highlights of the year, and that kind of goes along with what my other highlight is. It was really the community stuff this year. So the Burbank shows that we got to go to, got to get out to a few more shows, which we hadn't done in the past, and that was a lot of fun. And also just getting to know more people who like cards, whether it's on the Instagram community where Chris and I first started a weekly show where we could just talk live about baseball cards, and then people could chime in. And then we moved to YouTube, Blabbin' About Slabbin', and we still are doing our weekly show, and we've met a lot of awesome people that way. And it's a really inspiring way to stay involved in the hobby and talk about what we would talk about anyway, but other people join in. So I'd say that the biggest highlight, despite a lot of the cards going the wrong way this year, was the community aspect of it for me.
And then I do want to share mine real quick too. One thing I want to note to anybody who's actually viewing this on YouTube, if you're noticing my screen getting darker and darker, I'm at my in-laws' house and the lights are just dimming and I have no idea why. So by the end of this video, if it's just pitch black in here, just look at the other guys on the screen. But same with my microphone if it's not great. But I will say for me, some of the best moments this year is I've actually picked up some cards I've wanted for years that just somehow worked out. And the cards I sold to get those other cards don't mean much to me now. And it's funny how that can work for your personal collection. Phil mentioned that I am less of a collector than Jeff and Chris at the beginning of this. That's probably true. And because Jeff and Chris, they like want very specific runs and images and things. And I think Phil sees me sometimes getting a card and I'm really hyped. And then like 6 months later, I sell it. And there's probably some confusion there. But that's because I'm always just trying to progress my personal collection. And I want to get the best of the best if I can. And so I'll always do my best to have some sort of flipping mentality, but it's always maintaining money in cards. And so I was able to get this year like the Albert Pujols Bowman Chrome autograph as rookie auto, which is a big one. And I was also able to get a Mookie Betts Gold Bowman Chrome autograph, which is a big one for me. I also got a Mookie Betts 1/1 rookie. There's only like 5 of them out there, which was a big one for me. And all of these are cards I didn't think I'd have a chance at. The Mookie Betts Gold was on my radar. That was a goal of mine. But everything else, it just all worked out. And it's been really fun being able to target cool cards I didn't anticipate. And for me, maybe part of the reason why I do move on from cards is because after I hold them for a while, the fun can wear off of that card. Like, oh, maybe it wasn't as cool as I thought in the moment when I was salivating over it. But also, I think the thrill of the chase in cards is important. And I think that's what obviously makes cards valuable, like the Honus T206. People want that card and they're chasing after it. And they're trying to do whatever they can to find their unique story where they find them in an attic or a garage sale or all that stuff. And so I've really enjoyed that this year. I've had a really fun year in cards, which is good because I think some people might have felt the opposite where they might have had a brutal year with the market and their personal collection. And I think that all comes down to being willing to pivot if you need to and be okay with that. If it is like you want to maintain value, that's cool. So I've had a good year with that and I've had a lot of fun with it. So obviously it was fun meeting Phil at the National. I think that's actually where we discussed this podcast or YouTube channel the first time. So I brought it up to him and Ty and it's like, hey, I've been thinking about this. I really want to do it with you guys. I know 2 other kind of cool guys named Jeff and Chris. Maybe they just kidding. You guys were number 1 in my eyes. But yeah, so all that's been great. Obviously, starting this podcast with you guys has been fun. The community aspect is such a great part of sports cards, and we're happy to share our thoughts with you all. So, Chris, did you have something else you wanted to share?
Well, I just wanted to. I just want to talk about Jeff and I subbed over the course of 2023. We got about 120 cards back from PSA. Our percentage of grades we were happy with was 71% this year, Jeff. So I'm pretty excited about that. I will happily take that. Yeah. But there were 3 in particular that I still get excited, Scott, when I look at these cards. I still get like goosebumps. They're still thrilling to me in ways that are embarrassing and I don't want to say out loud. But so they are a Freddie Freeman Topps Chrome Gold Refractor rookie that got a PSA 10. Jeff did a fantastic job cleaning it up a little bit, and that is a pop 1. And when that thing popped, there's video of it. I basically crap my pants like live on camera. It's kind of funny to go back and look at it now, but I really lost my mind for about a minute and a half. Then we, Jeff and I have a Trout 2013 Topps Chrome SSP where he's holding the award. And this year we got that back from PSA. We have one of the 2 PSA 10s. That card still gets me really excited, even though I refuse to learn the name of the Angels GM who's on it. That's okay. No one needs to know the name of any Angels GM.
Is Arte Moreno on that card with Trout?
No. It's not the owner. I don't know who it is. And then I have that Freeman Aaron Heritage dual auto. That I happened at. It was ending at like 10 a.m. I got it for a good price, and that thing gemmed. I couldn't believe it. Like those 2 guys held that card and signed it, and somehow it came back a PSA 10. Those 3 cards, those made my year essentially. But conversely, Jeff and I bought a Bowman's Best gold refractor auto of Acuna, his rookie. We bought it like toward the end of last year. So we didn't spend a ton of money, but we definitely spent too much money. We graded it. It came back a 9. We're like, how? We cracked it. We looked at it. We cleaned it off again. We're like, this thing is perfect. We're trying it again. It came back a 9. Now, most people here would just cut their losses, but Jeff and I are stubborn at a heroic level, we're going to say. So we tried it a 3rd time, and God help us, it came back a 9 again. So we ended up selling it. We sent it into consignment and put it up for bids. And it went for, not only did it go for less than what we originally bought it for. So basically, instead of only losing $300 on the card, we lost like $450 on the card. So that was not great. I'm just going to think about that for a second. Jeff, how did you feel about that one?
Yeah, that was a little rough, but that kind of leads me into another bad situation that we encountered this year. It wasn't all Ohtani's for us. Let me ask you guys, if you were buying a card on August 10th, who would have been the worst player to buy on that date?
Has to be Ohtani.
Is it Wander Franco?
Oh, even worse than Ohtani, yeah.
So August 10th, we made an eBay purchase of a Wander Franco card. And it's what Chris and I think is probably his best card. It's, well, you know what? I can show you because look at, we got it delivered.
Yeah.
Still in the package. So his last game played was August 12th. So by the time we got this, it was worth probably 10% of what we paid for it. Maybe. So
we didn't want to be Jeff. We didn't want to be jerks. And like, I think we probably could have returned the card.
We could have sent it right back.
But it just felt like the wrong thing to do.
Here it is. This is our first time seeing it. We couldn't bear to open it, despite it being months old.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can get it without the glare.
It's a great card.
We spent a long time hunting for one of these that was like centered really, really well, and this is the
centering
nicest
was really bad on these
we ever saw.
Send that in to get graded. Get that PSA 10. Get the pop one.
How did how's the surface look on that?
What?
Well, I haven't taken it out yet. From here, it looks good.
Yeah.
It's
usually there's at least one dimple on there somewhere, but yeah.
Hopefully there's a big scratch on there. But yeah, so it was crazy buying that on the 10th and then hearing the news on the 12th, or actually it was the 13th when he was pulled out of the lineup. Yeah, that was a little disheartening. So was one of the lowlights of the year, but it was a good reminder that even something like a sure thing is not a sure thing.
You're not the only spitballing team to actually take a loss on Wander Franco this year. I know Ty, I don't want to share his stories for him, but he bought the gold heritage out of 5 Wander Franco.
That's right.
He didn't even pay that bad of a price for it. I actually thought he got a great deal. I was looking at that card, and he bought it before I did. And then he actually was smart. I thought he should have just held at the time, but I think he actually made the right move and auctioned it. And he recouped probably 30-40% of his, maybe not that high, maybe 25-30%.
Yeah, 25-30%. He got $600 for that thing. Like I had a snipe for it at the time, and it was like my snipe was like $250.
Yeah, that's what I thought it would go for.
Probably $600. Yeah.
So he did pretty good making some money back, because now with the news of Wander getting arrested today, that card is going to be worth not very much. I'm interested to see if he still has some people who just collect him for some reason, because the hobby kind of has things like that, but who knows?
Yeah, that was a bummer. But
Yeah.
timing is everything in sports cards, as they say.
So true.
Yeah.
So true, man. Yeah. So some of my stories, Wander Franco, speaking of which, I took a bath on him. I actually looked at my like all-time P&L with Franco because I've been like buying and selling him for years, and I was still like barely in the positives after like selling off almost the rest of all the cards I had of him. The only problem is I still have a red ink autograph rookie that I haven't sold yet. So maybe I told myself in my head like, oh yeah, well that'll be the one I just hold on to in case like something turns around. And to be transparent about this, like I did sell more than 75% of what I had left within the first month of the news. I did miss the first like week. Ty was smart. Ty did it right away. Ty got it within, I think, like 7 to 10 days after the news broke. I think at that point, his stuff was only down like 70%, 75%. Now, well, before this past weekend, he was probably down, I'm guessing, because if you look at like the alt movers, he kept on showing up in that list, like down another 10%, down another 10%. So I'm guessing he ended up down like 90 to 95%, and now maybe 97, depending on the card. Who knows? You just got to find somebody willing to take the risk, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I fault myself for that a little bit. I thought actually he was a little overvalued at the National before all this even happened, because that offense really started to slow down after April. The hard hit stats, even his WAR was being held up by his first month and with his defense, and stealing a ton of bases probably too, which nobody expected him to steal 30. People thought he was like a 15 to 20 steal guy. I think he was like well on his way to steal 30 plus with the new rules and everything, which helped. But I think I overlooked some potential warning signs with his character, given some of his Instagram posts. And I think we've talked about this a little bit, Jeff.
He's had other stuff happen too. Like
he had
a bunch of jewelry stolen, bunch of things that are not good.
Yeah, nothing like major in itself, but like fights with teammates. Like
he was benched for not hustling and showing up on time. Like that's not good at 20.
That's
right?
serious with like your crown franchise guy. You give him all this money, and you're like benching him like multiple days in a row. Like, did they even do that with Jazz Chisholm, who's had like similar issues in the clubhouse? They've had like meetings just about the guy where they just crapped on him. But yeah, I should have been more serious about selling that stuff. I was running into some issues where like I was watching a lot of his stuff getting shilled because his stuff was starting to fall from April prices. A lot of people were trying to get out. A lot of speculator money was very active trying to sell his cards and trying to hold up those prices by shilling similar cards, of which I had similar parallels. So I felt kind of stuck with his stuff. I should have listed it at bin and listed it really like aggressively low. But yeah, so the Wander exposure hurt. The Mike Trout exposure hurt. Now, very different situation with him. I've done very well selling his cards. Even if what I have left of him goes to zero, I'd still be very much in the positive. But I do have somewhat of a major card still of him that I'm holding. And I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, Scott, offline. And I think with you guys too, like it's probably greater chance his stuff is lower by the end of this coming year than higher. But who knows? Nobody can predict the future. A lot of this comes down to performance. Is there a trade? I don't know. But another mistake I made that people probably won't be too interested in hearing, but actually this one's kind of interesting. How much time do we have? So 23 Topps Chrome Hobby ended up being one of the better wax products this year. ROI, it's been okay too. MVP buyback program certainly helping. But I'm more talking about it from the standpoint of like in its sealed form, it dropped at around $130, $150 if you were to get it like that first week after release, late July. And now it's in like the low to mid 200s. On below it, it's probably like 270. I think on eBay auctions, they're ending around like 220, 230. Dealer to dealer market, I mean, you're not getting these for under 200 anymore. So even after that buyback window expires, they're not going to drop any more than 30, 40 bucks. I mean, they could be 190, 195. There's also broader factors that could cause that to go down too with all the players. So, but that's a product that I underestimated. I should have bought a little bit more at release. I think Topps was pricing it low because they knew they were changing the configuration, dropping the number of autographs from 2 to 1. That's pretty significant, right? I was thinking that there should be more value assigned to each autograph opportunity, even though they're usually, the checklist is usually long. The floor or like the low and the median autograph you pull is usually pretty unimpressive versus like a Bowman product. I don't think they knew how to price it this year. Last year was a complete disaster from a QC perspective, never mind the extended short print thing. They cut the autographs, and I think that's why they priced it a little bit lower. And they messed up. I messed up. I should have picked up more. It's all right. I just had to pick up a little bit later. Yeah, that's what I'm going with.
So for my negative experiences of 2023, the good news for me is I'm just so much smarter than the rest of the team here and didn't buy any Wander Franco cards. Just kidding. I just don't collect this era. And so I do have less exposure to people being stupid like that. And that's nothing of my own brains. It's more just the players I like are close to retirement, retired, or are more veterans that I've looked at. So I was lucky. I was really lucky that I didn't have a Wander Franco card in my collection. Like I mentioned, I was really close to buying both the gold tie bot and as well the short print, the super short print that you both got from Topps Chrome, Jeff and Chris. I love that card. I thought it was such a cool card. I was really close to pulling the trigger, but I didn't because of how many other SPs were out there. I wasn't as familiar with them. Didn't really feel comfortable or confident. So usually if you're not confident, if you don't buy, it's probably better anyways. So I was lucky there. But the thing that I messed up on this year, like pretty significantly, is I just have a real hard time sometimes selling stuff at the peak. Like, I know it's impossible to time the peak. It's impossible to know when that's going to be. But there's some players, whether it's Paul Goldschmidt or whether it's Mike Trout or whether even Mookie Betts. I did end up selling some cards of his this year and I did pretty good. But players I like, when they do well, I don't want to sell their cards. I tend to hold too long. And this year I needed to sell some cards to buy the other cool cards I purchased. And so I sold some cards for probably 40% of what I could have sold them within the last 24 months prior. So that's probably my worst. But in all reality, it ended up fine. Sometimes you take losses I don't mind in sports cards, especially if you're reporting your taxes correctly, which you're going to have to start doing this year no matter what now. It's nice to have some losses because it balances out the big hitters as well, occasionally with taxes. So, but that was my biggest thing. I just sold too late this year. This year, it wasn't as hot. There weren't as many buyers. The demand wasn't as strong. And it is what it is. So I think we probably can all relate in some capacity to that. Mike Trout's the one. I do want to talk about him real fast, Phil. I'm not high on Mike Trout right now because even if Mike Trout bounces back and plays 150 games and he has close to an MVP season, which he could because the AL MVP is a lot less tough than the NL at this point, which is kind of surprising. You have Judge and Soto are like your real competition. He really could win an MVP. He really could. But if he's on the Angels and they don't make the playoffs, I don't think people are going to care as much as we've seen, especially with Ohtani kind of swooping in and taking some of the shine as the best player of our generation type of a thing. So that was sad. I did sell some of my Trout collection to buy other players I care about, but I do have a lot of Trout, and maybe that's like my worst thing, but I still love the guy and I still want to collect his cards. But it's been a really bad thing to see the last 12 months, seeing one of these hobby giants kind of be just destroyed. And he's such a good dude, but it is what it is. You have to stay healthy. You have to win in order to have your cards go up. So,
all right. I want to talk about one thing. Oh, Jeff, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that's interesting on the Trout front, and Phil alluded to it a little bit before, is there could possibly be a trade. He could go somewhere else, and he has been a really good soldier for the Angels, and so good that they even said if he comes to us and wants a trade, we're going to do it. I think he just has to be a little bit more assertive and has to really take the bull by the horns and say, yes, I do want to go win. I want to get somewhere else. And I feel like something like that could pump his cards or maybe stop the free fall, I should say. But the other thing with him is he does have a lot of collectors, and I'm one of them, and probably a lot of collectors that'll go down with the ship. So the sell-off has been huge, but I don't know. I guess there's still more room to go, but I think there's a lot of people that are going to hold on to his cards because he's still a great player. He's still going to be one of the greats of our time.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think a lot of us, it's kind of, if we look back at even other players from other generations, it's not always the most dominant player That's the most valuable. We see that with Jeter. I wouldn't say he was the best player of his generation by any stretch, but he's worth quite a bit. And sometimes it's all about how we all feel in retrospect with nostalgia and rose-tinted color glasses, whatever you want to say. Maybe we'll feel that way about Trout. It's going to be interesting. People talk about Trout a lot and more than anybody else in sports cards. And obviously there's the Vegas Dave sale of $4 million on his Bowman Chrome Superfractor. That's always there.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want to talk about one thing that I did and that Jeff and I did together as well that started really good and then took kind of a turn into bad. So also preseason, Guerrero's cards were getting a little bit of a bump because I think people were expecting a breakout. They were expecting him to, return to form to be the 2021 Guerrero again. So we sold a whole bunch of Vlads that we had, like kind of mid-ends to lower end, like a Topps Chrome Blue Auto and a 9, a 2020 SSP, a couple Atomic rookies, a Sapphire rookie, a Topps Gold rookie, some pointing SSPs, and an SSP 9. We sold a bunch of stuff in that range, giving us a nice big pot of cash, which is good. But then we took that pot of cash and put it into Guerrero again, right back into Vlad. So we ended up buying a red ink PSA 10 and one of his update SSPs in a PSA 10 where he's holding the ball from his first hit. I love those two cards, and those two cards are great. But there was probably 50 things we could have done with that money that would have been better. Like selling Vlads was good. Buying Vlads with that money, not great. Not great.
I will say I don't want to say I've been hard on Vlad. I don't think I've been hard on him. I've been very honest about my opinions with Vlad, but I was comparing him to his father through the same age, and he's really not on a bad pace. He could really get back on a Hall of Fame path really easily. So I do think that I wouldn't give up on him is my thing. Like there is some people who are speculating on Vlad. I think there's a real chance that he could really bounce back and figure out the 2020 form again. I do. Am I optimistic of it? No, but it could happen because I thought he was way off his dad's pace, but they're almost identical in WAR at this age. So
yeah, he started so young that his count, if he can just start averaging 35 home runs a year for the night, like his counting stats are going to just steadily climb up at a pretty good rate. But he's posting a lot of workout videos this all season on his Instagram. So I don't know.
Totally.
Hopes are a medium level.
Because was he 24 this year?
Oh, God.
Is that correct? I think he was 24 this year, but if we compare that to like Adley Rutschman was 24 this year. And so it just shows you how young he still is. Even though he's been around since 2018, he's still not old. A lot of Hall of Famers don't hit their stride. Look at Adrian Beltre until he was like 30. And so there's potential for Vlad, and you have some of the best cards. So I'm trying to like hype you up here, Chris. That's still not terrible.
I appreciate that. If you look at his underlying metrics, there's a lot of good there too. It's just if he could bump that launch angle up, I think a lot of his numbers would go up.
If he could just not hit the ball as hard as possible right at the shortstop and third baseman, he'd be really good. So, or right away to straightaway center. I know that happens to him a lot in fly balls. A lot of hard hit balls that just aren't quite deep enough. So
yeah, I remember they made that announcement. They moved the gaps in. At the Rogers Center, and people are just like, "Oh, here we go! Here comes Guerrero," and he didn't homer at home until like June.
I wouldn't be surprised if they don't re-sign Vlad. I think if they gave Bo Bichette, they had to pick between Bichette and Guerrero. I wouldn't be surprised if they gave the money to Bichette and let Vlad walk, and that might be the best thing for Vlad because his road stats, even this last few years, have still been really good. It's just in the Rogers Center he struggled. So there's a chance he's not on that team soon and hits free agency because I think he has 2 years left of control.
Yeah,
by like age 26, 27, and that could end up being great if he goes to Fenway because I know he crushes there. He won't. He said he doesn't like Fenway, but he does really well there or something along those lines. So
he hit like 65 doubles if he went to Fenway.
Oh, he'd be so good.
The Rockies could be spenders in 2 years. Who knows?
The last time they spent was on Chris Bryant, and that turned out real good. So
that was terrible.
But the way Vlad hits, I don't want to. So Coors Field, it has a very deep left center field, and a lot of. If you actually look at the Would It Dong on Twitter, where it looks at all the ballparks, you can use Baseball Savant on Baseball Savant. You can see how many fly balls would be home runs in certain ballparks. A lot of times, that left center holds in a ton of home runs, surprisingly, because it's really deep, and so I think that could be tough. But what they do have is a ton of room for balls to drop in, so it would level out, but. I think his home runs could be hurt a little bit in Colorado.
You don't get many like 40, 50 home run seasons from Colorado Rockies hitters anymore. And that a lot of that has to do with the players they have. But yeah, the dimensions aren't what you'd expect for like a very hitter-friendly park.
Yeah, you have the high batting average. You have Charlie Blackmon and DJ LeMay who both won a batting title, and that's because of the space in the outfield. Yep. But it's not like the left field can be real tough for right-handed hitters. Plus, they raised the wall in right center field quite a bit too. So,
and don't forget the humidor.
The humidor's gone. All that. Speaking of, I'm really hoping Todd Helton makes the Hall of Fame. All right, Phil.
I was going to say the one thing about Vlad, he's young, but are his hips young? Does he have a young body? That's part of the issue. The issue is that we expect his prime to be like a period of like, you expect his prime to probably end at age 28, 29 because of his body type. Looking at like Prince Fielder and
that's
some
exactly
others.
what I'm going to bring up.
Yeah.
Fielder, yeah.
He's going to have that great season, but like, is it just going to be one? It's going to be two? And like, how many speculators are going to be selling at the first chance they have? Like what happened to Acuna this year and kept his prices from really, gave him some serious resistance. And whenever Luis Robert goes on like, oh, he's like top 5 in MVP. Why are his cars not going anywhere? Because everybody's taking the chance now to sell his 2,500 different short prints and parallels.
Yeah. You're sounding like me, Phil. You're sounding like me. That's dangerous.
By the way, I think I know why you never collected Wander Franco, because in a lot of the videos we were like, guess how many like Series 1 cards exist? It's always like pictures of Wander Franco. Guess how many Topps Chrome cards of Wander Franco? Guess how many rookies he has? And it's always Wander. So like,
guess how many one-of-ones? Yeah, maybe that's it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that was our downfall with Franco because we didn't collect him, but we thought he's so young, he's good. We felt like he was starting to show some more speed, more power. We thought he could be a transcendent force. So what one card would we want? And we found it.
It's a cool card.
Yeah, besides the Bowman Chrome like gold auto, which we couldn't afford.
Yeah.
You know, we were like, what one rookie card? Yeah. I mean, like that one, there's only 100 of them. Exactly. So much of that wax wasn't ripped. We're like, how many are out there? Maybe like 40. I gotta stop talking about it. So many people lost a lot more money than that. So
yeah, I was gonna say, I think like if we're feeling a little bad for ourselves because some of our dang it, I bought Vlad. Imagine the people who had big money in Wander right now. Like I can't even. I'm sorry to you. That's the worst part about modern baseball cards, right? Same with Tatis getting caught with steroids. It could happen to anyone, and it's brutal. So. And then everyone always says buy vintage, but vintage just does nothing for me. Like I like certain cards. Like I love the 1951 Bowman set and earlier, but a lot of the older vintage, you're really just paying for slightly better corners and edges, and it just isn't my type of thing. So it's tough. It's a tough balancing act with modern cards for sure.
Agreed. I mean, that's a risk you take when you're buying modern cards, that you're not only buying the player, but you're buying the person. And yeah, you're buying those people from a long time ago too, but everybody kind of knows about most of their skeletons. They know about the bad parts of Ty Cobb and Mickey Mantle and Babe Ruth. And luckily for them, there wasn't a lot of social media around to propagate all of that stuff. But that is a concern. And I think we're seeing that more and more with the cases you mentioned, Tatis, and now Wander Franco, and we're even seeing other sports as well. So yeah, it's definitely a concern when putting a lot of money into an individual player or the wax that they're in.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think Shine 150. So does he own the 1/1 Bowman Chrome autograph Wander Franco? I think
pretty
it
sure
went through his hands. And he also owns either the Luciano or the J-Rod from that set. And I'm pretty sure he owns or owned the Dominguez and the Ellie 1/1 Bowman Chrome Superfractor autos, and probably some other stuff. And I could be getting some of that wrong, but and I think Phil Hughes had like one of the reds of Wander Franco. I'm sure he's going to be able to survive that. But maybe if you combine the Tatis stuff that he also, because he was a big Tatis guy, maybe now he needs to file for bankruptcy or something. I'm just kidding.
Sign more
autographs. That's what I was going to say. Phil's really big on Phil Hughes was huge on Tatis and Franco. And if that's really what you put so much money into, that's just brutal. Like, how do you want to keep collecting at that point? And I'm sure he's doing fine, but it's still hard when you put big money and time and attention to two guys, and one does steroids, the other one is now arrested at age 22. It's tough. It's real tough. Modern baseball cards, they're tough.
What kind of season do you guys think Tatis needs to have in 2024 for his cards to even get to like 60% of where they were?
The thing is, they're not that low. These cards aren't that low. I actually did a video recently. I'm going to release it on my other channel where I compare him to where he's at. He's top 10 in modern values right now. He's not low. His card prices aren't that bad compared to other players. They're bad compared to where he was, but he's one of my like dark horse MVP picks. I think he could really win the MVP next year. If he does, short term, people will forget the steroid stuff. Long term, I don't know.
I have my theory on Tatis is so Scott, you called him like a guy that could have a good bounce back year, but then you told us after the show that you don't actually have any cards of him.
Zero.
And I don't know if you had any plans to buy any at some point, but
Zero.
He's interesting. I think that if you're gonna buy a card of him, so like a bone chrome autograph refractor, whatever, 9, like a mint grade, maybe you get it for, I don't know, is it like 1,100, 700, whatever. A card that's like above $1,000 of Tatis right now, like you have to be thinking about like, what kind of idiot am I going to be able to offload this to, knowing that the injury issues and obviously like the long-term, blemish, right? Like there's a serious ceiling. I think there's a clear ceiling with his cards because like who would be willing to take a risk on, so you buy a card for like 1,100, then it goes up to 1,800 based on some comps or some other like, other cards that might have sold, and you drive the value off to like 499 based on that. Like who would take the risk at buying him at like 2,000, 2,500 right now, even 1,800? Because is there going to be another buyer that's going to be able to buy it from them at 4,000, or are they going to like really be okay with holding that long term, thinking that something good might happen and it might go up even more? I see actually maybe some opportunity, like what Scott's saying. We've seen this all the time. Like guys have bad seasons and then they come back, right? Like just because you had a great, like Corbin Carroll went 25-50, that doesn't mean he's going to do it again. We can't just bake that in. A lot of people already have, which is another issue with Corbin Carroll right now. But Ronald Acuna showed absolutely no power last year, meaning 2022. Comes out this year, completely different hitter, right? Guys just have off years, whether it's related to injuries, recoveries, or just whatever. They just can't put it together. So like if Tatis comes out and he's probably already going to be like a top 3 favorite in the NL to win MVP, I guess after Acuna, and maybe that's it because he's so well-rounded and Ohtani's not going to be able to pitch much, right? So, or at all. So with Tatis, maybe he's on pace for like a 10 more season, and it's like mid-May. I could see his low-end stuff going up is what I'm saying. His like mid-end stuff, maybe. The stuff that's like already really expensive, like even though that's the area I like to operate in, like the Bowman Chrome autograph stuff where it's really limited. I don't know. I maybe I avoid that for like one of his Sapphire base autos in a PSA 10 or his Gold Series 2 in a PSA 10 is probably like $350, $400 now. Maybe that's the place to go to play, not to give investment advice or anything.
Phil, what about his Stadium Club Gold Minted, Phil? Because that's one card that was my favorite rookie card of his. I love that card. It's a beautiful, beautiful card. And no one seems to want it right now.
And his image variation from Stadium Club's sick.
Yeah, yep. That's his only SP. That's his only image variation rookie. It's the only one. It's a cool card.
So I have my own thoughts on Tatis, which I probably have shared before, but he had 5.5 WAR last year with a 113 OPS plus. That's because he went from being a bad defensive player, maybe average, it depends on the metric you're looking at, to the best defensive outfielder in baseball. And it's just hard to fathom that happened. And I don't think that's going to regress too much. It's going to regress a little bit. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe he keeps going up, wins another platinum glove. Who knows? But I think his glove is going to give him almost a guaranteed 3 WAR at this point, 2.5 to 3 WAR. And he has a 6 to 7 offensive WAR ceiling. And so really he could have a 10 WAR season and it wouldn't completely blow me away. Like that's the thing that's hard about it. And the way cards work is, yes, it's all about in the long run, who's going to buy these cards to maintain values. But the long run in modern baseball cards is not a thing. 99.9% are all going to drop from their current values. And so I think there is someone, you don't agree with that comment, Chris? Long run's tough for modern cards.
I don't want to agree with it, but I'm not disagreeing with it.
Yeah, right. But I feel comfortable with 99.9 when you consider how many sets of every single player's out there nowadays. But there's a real chance that people feel really bad and they feel left out and they have FOMO and they spend big if he wins an MVP, especially if you're a Padres fan. I think there's that chance, but I'd be concerned in 5 years for value, 10 years, like Phil mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, his last full season before he got hurt, he led the NL in home runs. So, I mean, the power's there. It just wasn't there last year.
He led the NL in 2021 in offensive WAR with 7.3. If you add that to the 2.3 D WAR, it does not always translate perfectly. You have right there a 9.6 WAR season. So it's there, man. And maybe those numbers were just inflated because he was literally doing anabolic steroids, but who knows? I think if someone has extra money and if you want to go crazy and take a shot because it's disposable income and you're not listening to us tell you what to do, but I think there's some real opportunity in Tatis. I just don't have the confidence myself to do it. I want to point out one thing that didn't make sense in 2023. I still think Ronald Acuna Jr. didn't get the respect he deserves, and that was really weird throughout the entire year. But I did the same video. He actually is still top 3 value-wise in Major League Baseball. So maybe he was just priced too much at the beginning of this year, and now he's priced appropriately. So there's my thoughts.
Well, just to add to that, I think a lot goes with what Phil was saying too, that there were so many people that invested in him or bought into him at the peak and rode that all the way down, that when he showed his card value, showed any signs of life, they were ready to sell and get out. So there was quite a resistance there, as he mentioned, for going much higher. But if we see another season like we did this year, maybe it's different. Of course, there's external market factors that'll impact that as well.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I don't think there was at any point this season there were less than 4 Sapphire PSA 10s available on eBay. Like pretty much any day from like May 1st on, they were always out there. So it's hard for the price to jump when the supply stays, that high.
Definitely. Well, any final thoughts on Acuna 2023? Anything there by chance? Or are we good to let everybody go? All right. Well, everybody, thanks for listening. If you enjoy this podcast and this YouTube channel, please subscribe and follow. We would love to have other people find it as well. And you liking, subscribing, sharing, commenting, we appreciate it because it helps the algorithm reach new audiences. And thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next video.